You're watching Truth Talk News.
According to a report last summer, the global elite have up to $32 trillion stashed in offshore banks around the globe. In retrospect, the United States GDP for 2011 was about $15 trillion, and the U.S. national debt at this time is hovering around $16 trillion. Now, as far as the elite, it doesn't even include the money that they have stashed in other locations, like the Cayman Islands, or hard assets such as real estate, gold, silver, art, and all the other things that the elite cherish and hold so dear to themselves and pay no taxes on. As a result, the global elite have hoarded an incredible amount of wealth. Rich individuals and their families have as much as $32 trillion of hidden financial assets in offshore tax havens, representing up to $280 billion in lost income tax revenues, according to a research study published recently. The study estimates that the extent of global private financial wealth held in offshore accounts, excluding non-financial assets such as real estate, puts the sum between $21 and $32 trillion. The research was compiled by Tax Justice Network, which campaigns against tax havens, by James Henry, former chief economist and consultant at McKinsey & Company. The data was obtained from the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, the United Nations, and central banks. The elite also own just about every major bank and every major corporation on the entire planet. A study of more than 40,000 transnational corporations conducted by the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich discovered that a very small core group of huge banks and giant predator corporations dominate the entire global economic system. What a surprise. This is what we talk about here on Truth Talk News. An analysis of the relationship between 43,000 transnational corporations has identified a relatively small group of companies, mainly banks, with disproportionate power over the global economy. The researchers found that this core group consists of just 147 very tightly knit companies. When the team further untangled the web of ownership, it found that much of it tracked back to a super entity of 147 even more tightly knit companies. All of their ownership was held by other members of the super entity that controlled 40% of the total wealth in the network. In effect, less than 1% of the companies were able to control 40% of the entire network, said Glatfelder. Most were financial institutions. The top 20 included Barclays Bank, JP Chase & Company, and of course Goldman Sachs. The following are the top 25 banks and corporations at the heart of this super entity. You will recognize many of the names on the list: Barclays, Capital Group Companies, FMR Corporation, AXA, State Street Corporation, JP Chase & Company, Legal & General Group, Vanguard Group, UBS AG, Merrill Lynch & Company, Wellington Management & Company, Deutsche Bank, Franklin Resources, Credit Suisse Group, Walton Enterprises, Bank of New York Mellon Corp, Natixis, Goldman Sachs, T. Rowe Price, Legg Mason, Morgan Stanley, Mitsubishi, UFJ Financial Group, Northern Trust Corporation, Societe Generale, and Bank America, of course. The ultra-wealthy elite often hide behind layers and layers of ownership, but the truth is that thanks to interlocking corporate relationships, the elite basically control almost every Fortune 500 company. The amount of power and control this gives them is hard to describe. Unfortunately, the same group of people have been running things for more than a century. Sadly, most Americans still believe the Federal Reserve is a federal agency. But that's simply not correct. The following comes from factcheck.org. The stockholders in the 12 regional Federal Reserve banks are privately owned banks that fall under the Federal Reserve System. These include all national banks chartered by the federal government and those state-chartered banks that wish to join and meet certain requirements. About 38% of the nation's more than 8,000 banks are members of this system, and thus own the Fed banks. According to researchers that have looked up the ownership of the big Wall Street banks that dominate the Fed, the same names keep coming up over and over. The Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, the Lazards, the Schiffs, and the royal families of Europe. But the ultra-wealthy international bankers have not just done this kind of thing in the United States. Their goal was to create a global financial system that would dominate the world and control it. The powers of financial capitalism had another far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. This system was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences. The apex of the system was to be the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations. Sadly, most Americans have never even heard of the Bank of International Settlements, but it is at the very heart of the global financial system. As an organization of central banks, the BIS seeks to make monetary policy more predictable and transparent among its 58 member central banks. While monetary policy is determined by each sovereign nation, it is subject to central and private banking scrutiny and potentially to speculation that affects foreign exchange rates and especially the fate of export economies. Failures to keep monetary policy in line with reality, like what's going on now, and make monetary reforms in time, preferably as a simultaneous policy among all 58 member banks, and also involving the International Monetary Fund, have historically led to losses in the billions as banks try to maintain a policy using open market methods that have proven to be based on unrealistic assumptions. The ultra-wealthy have also played a major role in establishing other important international institutions, such as the United Nations, the IMF, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization. The international bankers are internationalists, and they are very proud of that fact. The elite also dominate the education system in the United States. Over the years, the Rockefeller Foundation and other elitist organizations have poured massive amounts of money into Ivy League schools. Today, Ivy League schools are considered to be the standard against which all other colleges and universities in America are measured, and the last 4 U.S. presidents were educated at Ivy League schools. The elite also exert a tremendous amount of influence through various secret societies, Skull and Bones, the Freemasons, also through very powerful think tanks and social clubs, the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, the Bohemian Grove, Chatham House, etc. And through a vast network of charities and non-governmental organizations such as the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and the World Wildlife Fund. But for a moment, I want to focus on the power the elite have over the media. 6 monolithic corporate giants control much of what we watch, hear, and read every single day. These giant corporations own television networks, cable channels, movie studios, newspapers, websites, magazines, publishing houses, music labels, and considering the fact that the average American watches 153 hours of television a month, the influence of these 6 giant corporations should not be underestimated. The following are just some of the media companies that these corporate giants own. Time Warner owns HBO, Time Magazine, Turner Broadcasting, Warner Brothers, CW Network, TMZ, New Line Cinema, Time Warner Cable, Cinemax, Cartoon Network, TBS, TNT, America Online, MapQuest, MoviePhone, Castle Rock, Sports Illustrated, Fortune, Marie Claire, People Magazine. It goes on and on. Walt Disney, ABC Television Network, Disney Publishing, ESPN. It's just a tremendous holding. Walt Disney owns all of these films, Miramax Films, Touchstone Pictures, Lifetime, A&E, ABC. Viacom owns Paramount Pictures and BET and Country Music Television, MTV, and all of those Nick at Night and all those shows. That's all Viacom. And the News Corporation owns Dow Jones and Fox News, the New York Post. News Corporation owns, oh my God, Sky, Perfect TV, 20th Century Fox, DirecTV. It's just unbelievable, incredible connections here. Now we have CBS, of course. CBS is direct on all of their news and everything. They also own Infinity Broadcasting, Simon & Schuster Books. NBC owns everything NBC, NBC Universal. You have CNBC, MSNBC, all of this really leftist stuff here. Starting to get the picture? We have these corporations that are working in concert, these large, major, thousands and thousands of corporations that are controlled basically by a handful. In comparison, only about 147 corporations, and of those 147, there are connections to all of the rest, and control. They control 40% of the market. That's an incredible amount of power. They're even proud of it. David Rockefeller wrote the following in his 2003 book entitled Memoirs. For more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents, such as my encounter with Castro, to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over the American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we're part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as industrialists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that is the charge, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it. There is so much more that could be said about all of this. In fact, an entire library of books could be written about the power and the influence of the ultra-wealthy international bankers that run the world.
The Second Amendment is not about duck hunting, but it's about our rights, all of our rights, to be able to protect ourselves from all of you guys up there.
UN Agenda 21, bailouts, sellouts, Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, false flag, terror attacks, Bill Gates, Henry Kissinger, New World Order, mind control, Bank of America stealing homes with cut and paste mortgage loans, police, state, taser guns, FEMA camps, Mandarin, Monsanto rules the food supply while Big Pharma dopes your mind, prison system, puppeteers, foundations, fund the fears, fund the evil through the years, the world's not as it appears. CIA smuggles drugs while Wachovia and Wells Fargo launder them, then give the proceeds to the owners of the Federal Reserve Bank. Now the IRS takes money out of every single check. Money created out of thin air and leave you with debt. They want to make you a serf, a slave to their demand. They want to take your life in every way they can. Fluoride, GMO, vaccines, chemtrails, United Nations genocide. The world they show us is not real. This is how they kill and steal. Rothschild, Bundy, Rockefeller, Club of Rome, on the Georgia Guide, soldiers written in stone. Cut through the matrix, awaken to the lies. Do not be hypnotized. We are one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The lethality of their power is greater than ever. Their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. In earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people. Literally, it was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people.
Something has gotten lost. And that something is the truth. What is it in us that seeks the truth? Is it our minds? Or is it our hearts?
You're watching Truth Talk News.